Hello ladies and gentlemen, it's Young here and welcome to a Metal Gear Solid 5 trailer analysis. We have all waited a very long time for a brand new trailer, but as I'm sure most of you will agree, the wait was completely worth it. So now the time has come to break the trailer apart piece by piece and reveal all of its hidden secrets. There's a lot to talk about, so without further ado, let's dive right into it. The trailer begins with a quote from Mark Twain. Anger is an acid that can do more harm to the vessel in which it is stored than to anything on which it is poured. The basic meaning of this message is that a man overcome with anger can do more harm to himself than to those he unleashes the anger upon. With revenge being one of the main themes of Phantom Pain, there is little doubt that Big Boss will perform merciless atrocities to make those responsible for the death of his comrades pay. But the quote suggests that the individual who will suffer more than anyone as a cause of his anger is Big Boss himself. In the trailer's first shot of in-game footage, we are shown a complete and utter massacre of an unspecified location. At a glance, it's hard to tell what this place is or who these corpses belong to, but if you look at some of the details, you will quickly realize that this is Africa and that the corpses lying on the floor are mostly African children, possibly child soldiers. You can tell this is Africa by the palm trees in the background, which resemble those found in this shot from last year's E3 trailer, and also by this animal here, the lappet-faced vulture, a species that can be found all throughout Africa. And you can tell these are the corpses of African children by their natural dark skin and young body physique. And like the child soldiers shown in last year's E3 trailer, many of these bodies are clearly half naked, since otherwise there would be some kind of cloth residue. The same applies for shoes. You can tell that many of these bodies weren't wearing shoes, further proving that these corpses are those of young Africans, since shoes of any kind are a luxury in poor regions of Africa. Part of me thinks that the young Africans could be some of the same child soldiers found in last year's E3 trailer, because of this tank in the background, which resembles the one found in this footage of last year's trailer. Maybe these two tanks are one and the same, perhaps suggesting that this massacre occurs in this exact same location. You can even see that both locations contain identical barrels, albeit with varying colors. Bottom line is, evidence seems to point to this massacre taking place in Africa, with many of the casualties being African children, possibly child soldiers. So then the question becomes, what caused all this? Perhaps the trailer answers that question as we are shown Big Boss stepping into the shot, just completely covered in blood. I can't say for sure whether Big Boss was the cause of this massacre, or whether he failed in preventing it, but the blood all over his body doesn't really make a good case for him. Oh, and fun fact, see how the belt is dangling in the back? In a recent tweet, Kojima revealed that he did this on purpose to make it look like a tail to match Snake's demon-like horn, completing that devil look. Moving on, we are shown the Konami logo. A small detail I would like to point out is the subtle fire emanating from below, which goes in line with the trailer's demonic and hellish motif. This next shot, for example, shows this giant burning fire with Big Boss standing before it, like a demon and his army standing in the midst of hell's flame. I know that may sound pretentiously profound, but trust me when I say that cinematographers select very specific shots to convey very specific things, and this shot in particular definitely seems to have that demonic, hellish vibe. The scene itself shows what's clearly a funeral ceremony for soldiers, as noted by the rows of caskets blanketed by the flag of the nation for which the soldiers fought for, Diamond Dogs. MSF was pretty much considered a country of its own, so there's no reason to think that Diamond Dogs can't be the next nation without borders. Something that I don't get is how Big Boss managed to retrieve the bodies of people who perished 9 years ago. Maybe Kaz took care of that during his coma, finding as many bodies as he could and hiding them and preserving them. And in fact, if you look at the number of caskets, there really aren't that many, perhaps suggesting that most of the bodies were lost. Eventually, Kaz joins Big Boss in mourning their comrades. Instead of burying them, you can see that Big Boss resorts to cremation. Ideally, soldiers are to be buried honorably in their home country, but keep in mind that Big Boss's soldiers are all men without a nation. As members of MSF, or in this case Diamond Dogs, these men have relinquished their past identities and nationalities, so to bury them in the soil of any other country would tarnish what these soldiers stood for by joining Big Boss, and since there is no soil to bury these soldiers within the offshore Diamond Dogs base, the next best thing is honorable cremation. After cremation, the remains are then placed inside these white containers, which essentially act as urns, and the original plan was to scatter the remains into the sea. This is very symbolic of the idea that these were men who abandoned their nationalities to become part of Big Boss's haven for soldiers. The deep sea isn't owned by any one country, so scattering the remains into the sea honors their service. Now, just as he's about to scatter the ashes, Big Boss does something rather unorthodox. Instead of scattering the ashes, he opens the container and rubs the ashes all over his face. It's both beautiful and disturbing. Beautiful because this shows just how much Big Boss cared for his people. By rubbing the ashes on his face, Big Boss is essentially becoming one with his fallen comrades, taking up all their burdens and promising to avenge them. At least, that's my perspective. At the same time, it's pretty disturbing to see just how deeply Big Boss has been compromised emotionally. You really have to be losing yourself to go as far as rubbing the ashes of the dead all over your face. This kind of thing is just unheard of. Another way Big Boss memorializes these soldiers is by wearing this MSF arm padding on his right arm. Now that I think about it, he was probably wearing this in last year's E3 trailer, but it was not possible to see it since the logo was covered up by the scarf. In this trailer, on the other hand, it's much easier to spot since Big Boss isn't wearing the scarf all the time. Not gonna lie, it's kinda cool to see the logo return. It's a reminder for both Big Boss and the players why we will be embarking on this journey for vengeance. Now, I must say the facial capture is paying off big time. You can actually see how heartbroken Big Boss is just by looking at his facial expression and the subtle movements it makes. It's pretty awesome. Now, here is something that'll get people talking. I have a feeling that this is from the same scene found in the beginning of the trailer with all the corpses, but this footage likely takes place further back when the fire was still burning. Just what the hell did you do, Big Boss? The next shot shows us the scene from which one of the pre-E3 screenshots was taken from. It's hard to say where this is exactly, but based on the fact that Snake is wearing a scarf and the tiger stripes camo, I would say this is somewhere in the Afghanistan desert. More significant than that, however, is the fact that Big Boss is finally aiming with his left eye. You know, the one that works. We are then shown a Diamond Dogs training session led by Ocelot. He doesn't seem to be there on a provisional basis, considering he's proudly wearing the Diamond Dogs insignia on his left arm. I wonder what was Ocelot's motivation for joining Big Boss's army, and what was Big Boss's reason for trusting him. I know he's a bit of a Big Boss fanatic, but he has switched allegiances so many times at this point that he makes a season of 24 look like an episode of Blue's Clues. Also, you gotta love how the one dude is practicing Ocelot's cowboy style of shooting. Ocelot looks pretty proud back there. One other small detail I want to point out is this watch that this recruit is wearing. I could be wrong, but it looks a lot like the watch that came with the limited edition of Ground Zeroes that was released in Japan. In the next shot, we are shown a bird's eye view of Diamond Dog's base of operations, which looks a hell lot like Mother Base from Peace Walker. What's interesting is that just about every journalist has taken to calling it Mother Base when they shared their impressions on the E3 2014 Closed Doors demo, so that's just what I'm going to call it until we get official confirmation. But I get the feeling that the name Mother Base will stick. Now, what's striking about this new Mother Base is that it looks very similar to Big Shell from Metal Gear Solid 2, but don't get the wrong idea, this is not Big Shell, period. Big Shell was constructed after the tanker chapter in Metal Gear Solid 2, so sometime between 2007 and 2009, many years after Phantom Pain, which takes place in 1984. Furthermore, Big Shell is located just 30 kilometers offshore of Manhattan, New York. It's highly unlikely that Mother Base is located there since journalists have confirmed that Snake can fly back and forth from Mother Base to locations like Afghanistan and Africa via chopper. There's just no way for a chopper to fly from New York all the way to Afghanistan or Africa without inconveniences like having to refuel, at least as far as I know. The most convenient and likely location for the new Mother Base would have to be around this area of the world map, where Diamond Dogs would be at close distances to a large portion of both the Middle East and Africa. Mother Base and Big Shell also have key differences that separate them from one another. For example, if you look at Big Shell, you may notice that everything about it is hexagonal, from the shapes of the individual struts to the structure of the entire facility. On the other hand, the small glimpses we have had of Mother Base clearly show that the individual struts are square shape, or should I say diamond shape, with shaved corners. Alright, now that I've made it abundantly clear that this base is not Big Shell, let's talk about why the base looks like Big Shell. There is no denying that Mother Base's color scheme is identical to Big Shell's, or that they are both offshore facilities, and this screenshot shows a kidnapper from Peace Walker with a color scheme that vastly resembles the ciphers from Metal Gear Solid 2. I can think of two possible explanations for the resemblances, one simple and one complex. The simple possibility is that for the trailer, Kojima consciously decided to customize his Mother Base to look like Big Shell to pay homage to MGS2. Lest we forget, Mother Base is fully customizable in Phantom Pain. While it's still unknown to what extent, I don't think it's far-fetched to assume that players will be able to choose a color scheme for the base and its contents that will show through cutscenes. Similar to how in Peace Walker, players could choose a color scheme for Metal Gear Zeke that would show through cutscenes and in the final battle. If Mother Base's color scheme can indeed be customized, then this is certainly a plausible explanation. Now, if it turns out that Mother Base's color scheme is confined to this orangish tan color, then the only explanation that I can think of is that when it was constructed, Big Shell was inspired by Diamond Dog's Mother Base. If you recall, the entirety of the Big Shell incident ended up being a simulation orchestrated by the Patriots AI to test out the S3 plan. And while the mission was designed to resemble the Shadow Moses incident, what if the simulation stage was inspired by Mother Base? Perhaps it's no coincidence that they are both offshore plans, have similar architectures featuring interconnected struts, and have an identical color scheme. As for how the Patriots AI could have known about Diamond Dogs, keep in mind that during Big Shell's construction, Ocelot was working for the Patriots, waiting for the right time to betray them, and with how involved Ocelot seems with Diamond Dogs and Phantom Pain, it's certainly possible that Ocelot relayed Mother Base's architectural information to the Patriots, whether it be from memory or documents that he kept. And if Zero, aka Cypher, becomes an active player in Phantom Pain, he too could have been a source of information. Me personally, I'm betting on the simple theory that Kojima purposely customized Mother Base to look like Big Shell to pay homage to MGS2, and to play with our emotions. So bottom line, either Mother Base's color scheme is customizable and Kojima simply customized his base to look like Big Shell as a homage, or the color scheme isn't customizable and Diamond Dog's Mother Base was the inspiration behind the construction of Big Shell. These are the two theories I have. Now, one last theory is that the previous two theories are mutually inclusive. Maybe Mother Base's color scheme is customizable and was also the inspiration behind Big Shell, since regardless of color scheme, both share a similar architecture involving interconnected struts. And as mentioned before, they are both offshore facilities. I don't know, there are many possibilities, and I would love to hear your thoughts. One final thing I would like to point out are the multiple choppers in this shot, confirming that unlike in Ground Zeroes, players will have access to multiple choppers. Best part is, they are all fully customizable. Moving on, the trailer shows off what's likely a cutscene that occurs soon after Kaz is rescued from Afghanistan, and shortly before this scene from last year's trailer. Here is a close-up of the Diamond Dog's logo on the jacket. The dog in the logo seems to be based on the Rhodesian Ridgeback, which is a breed that appeared in both a concept art of Phantom Pain and a screenshot from way back when MGS5 was simply known as Project Ogre. We then get a good look at the base itself, which is not only massive in scale, but also looks alive with soldiers standing guard and running around. Later in the shot, we can also see a Diamond Dogs flag standing tall, giving the impression that Diamond Dogs is a full-blown country. Diamond Dogs will likely retain the concept of a nation without borders and a haven for soldiers, but this time, their driving force won't be any nation, ideology, justice, power, the future, love, or peace. It will only be for revenge. Moving on, we are given a brief look at some sort of invasion. What's clear to me right off the bat is that these are not Diamond Dog's forces. Not only are these tanks the same models found in this scene from last year's E3 trailer, but if you take a look at the choppers, they don't have the Diamond Dog's insignia on them. So the question then becomes, who are they and where is this invasion occurring? Is this Africa or Afghanistan? My bet is on this location being Afghanistan, meaning that these are likely Soviet troops mobilizing, since it was confirmed during the closed doors gameplay demo at E3 2014 that the soldiers throughout the Afghanistan desert are Soviets, but it's hard to say for sure since there aren't any symbols on the vehicles representing a group and since the men's faces are covered by their helmets. Things get more interesting in this next shot, in which we are shown Big Boss himself prepping Huey for torture. Many questioned previously whether Big Boss actually sanctioned Huey's torture, since in last year's E3 trailer, we only see Ocelot and Kaz in the room, but now there is little doubt in my mind that Big Boss personally gave the order. Now, in regards to why Big Boss would order an interrogation on Huey, I've already made an extensive video on evidence that incriminates Huey as a key contributor to the destruction of Mother Base, so be sure to check the video out for a full explanation. You can do so by clicking on the annotation or by clicking on the appropriate link in the description below. We then get to witness what may initially look like a sparring session, but in my eyes, these guys are actually fighting each other for real. Considering Diamond Dogs is purely driven by anger and pain, and considering the controversial aspects of the group, I don't think it's far-fetched to believe that there will be a lot of inner conflict, and we actually get more glimpses of this throughout the entire trailer. We are then taken back to the torture sequence, in which we are shown Ocelot injecting some kind of drug into Huey. This shot is likely connected to this cutscene in last year's E3 trailer showing Ocelot prepping Huey for torture as Kaz watches without pity. Kaz also seems to have no remorse when it comes to smacking kids with his crutch. I've heard some interesting theories about this kid, like the possibility that he is Drebin from MGS4. It's hard to say because so little is known about Drebin, so I'll reserve judgment until I find out more about this kid, but I'll keep the theory in mind. Now, if we go back a few frames and freeze the footage, you can see that these 3 child soldiers are all from a scene from last year's E3 trailer showing off one of their training sessions. Perhaps they are survivors of that onslaught shown at the beginning of the trailer. I wonder what Big Boss is doing with these kids. Is he actually planning to recruit them? In this scene, it's almost as if Kaz is testing the kid by smacking him, just to see how he will react, and Big Boss, almost expecting the kid's ruthless and aggressive reaction, just kind of hands him the weapon. If Big Boss does end up recruiting them and using them in the battlefield, I honestly would not be surprised. At this point, Big Boss is beginning to turn into the man we see in Metal Gear 1 and Metal Gear 2, and those who've played Metal Gear 2 may remember that scattered throughout Zanzibar land were orphan children saved from conflict, all whom Big Boss intended to train and put in the battlefield. Perhaps Big Boss's practice of training child soldiers begins here. We are then taken back to the fight between Diamond Dog soldiers, which soon culminates into one of them drawing a knife and displaying murderous intent. This footage will come into play later, so let's put a pin on it. Things then get really interesting as we are shown a struggle between Big Boss and Eli, aka Young Liquid Snake. The struggle is clearly taking place inside what seems to be Eli's home. We got a glimpse of it in last year's E3 trailer, except this time, Eli is using the plastic chair as a weapon. The back of Eli's shirt says, "Never be game over." Unfortunately, I have no idea what that phrase could mean, but as is traditional with any unknown phrase, people have begun to decrypt possible anagrams, and I think I read somewhere in the comments that one anagram for the phrase is "Ever Brave Genome." I can't say for sure if the anagram was actually a part of Kojima's plan, or if it's just a coincidence, so I'll reserve judgment on this anagram for now. What I really want to focus on are these Japanese symbols. Native Japanese speakers have translated the symbols as liquid person or liquid man. Yeah, if that doesn't confirm that Eli is liquid, I don't know what does. But I wonder why it's written in Japanese. Was Japanese one of the 7 languages that Liquid learned? It's possible, since only 5 of them are known thus far: English, Spanish, French, Malay, and Arabic. One last thing on the back of his shirt that I would like to point out is this picture of a pig head. If you look closely, the pig seems to be wearing an eye patch on its right eye, similar to Big Boss. This is likely one way Eli expresses his hate towards his father for supposedly giving him the inferior genes, a youth who curses his fate, so to speak. Anyways, as the struggle continues, Eli eventually pulls out a switchblade. Now, something that I've noticed is that throughout these various shots in which knives are shown up close, there's always this lens flare effect that happens. I don't know if that's significant, I don't know if that's indication that there will be more knife-based CQC, if it's gonna be some kind of cue for something, not really sure, but just something I would like to point out. We are then taken back to Mother Base, with Big Boss breaking up the fight and punishing his recruits after one of the soldiers went too far by drawing a knife on his comrade. This is Big Boss basically saying, "You are willing to kill one of your comrades? Then here, you won't have a problem with stabbing me right here, right now." It's important to keep in mind that Diamond Dog's sole purpose is retribution for their fallen comrades, so to turn on one another is one of the worst sins possible in the eyes of Big Boss. This is sort of Big Boss's way of reminding them who the real enemy is. We are then taken right back to the struggle between Eli and Big Boss, where we can see father and son sharing some quality time as Liquid gets what could be his first taste of CQC. Now, obviously, Big Boss doesn't actually stab Eli. He probably stabs the floor next to his head or something just to scare him a little bit. Hanging on the wall is a carpet, and if you compare it to the footage from last year's trailer, you will notice they are identical in terms of pattern, further proving that the two locations are one and the same. Now, what's interesting is that we might have been wrong about Eli's whereabouts. It was believed that Eli was located in the Middle East when we saw the E3 2013 trailer, but I think it's more likely that he's located in Africa. Notice how Big Boss is not wearing the scarf and the camo he wears in the Afghanistan desert, instead wearing the same outfit from the massacre in Africa. Also, if we go back a little bit, you will notice that the background is lush with tropical vegetation, also similar to the scenes in Africa. We know that Liquid was in the Middle East at a young age, but there is no history of him ever being in Africa that we know of, so this certainly raises a lot of interesting questions. Moving on, after a little Big Boss and Kaz bromance, we are taken to a completely new scene showing a male soldier, likely Soviet, pursuing a female captive somewhere in the Afghanistan desert. I'll talk more about the female captive's identity in a later footage. Now, something else that was confirmed from the closed doors gameplay demo was that there will be multiple Soviet bases within the Afghanistan desert, so this could be one of them, considering that the building in the back seems capable of housing a base. Next, we are taken back to Mother Base once again, this time showing a mob of Diamond Dog's recruits going nuts over something or someone. Perhaps a prisoner is being brought into Mother Base for interrogation. I mean, to get these guys so worked up, it's gotta be someone who is under suspicion of contributing to the destruction of Mother Base, perhaps someone like Huey Emmerich. We are then taken right back to the scene with a female captive. You can clearly see that the torture victim is none other than Quiet. Interesting to note is the fact that she's actually wearing clothes, and I don't just mean that in a pervy way. Kojima said a while ago that there's a very specific reason why Quiet dresses the way she does, although he never elaborated further. One popular assumption is that Quiet is somehow related to the End from MGS3 because of similarities like the fact that they are both snipers, and the fact that Quiet's mascara fades in a similar fashion to how the End's liver spots fade when using his photosynthetic abilities. So the theory is that Quiet also has photosynthetic abilities, which she can use to greater effect when her body is exposed. Therefore, perhaps by putting clothes on her, the Soviets have crippled Quiet to some degree. Oh, and one more thing to note is this small fort here with heavy artillery, which is likely there to defend something like a base, further suggesting that this location is some kind of Soviet base. Here we have some more bromance between Big Boss and Kaz, with this cutscene likely taking place soon after he's unloaded from the chopper. Interesting to note is that Snake is no longer wearing the scarf and the tiger stripes camo, despite the fact that he just came back from the desert. Either he takes it off soon after landing on Mother Base, or this suggests that players aren't necessarily required to wear the scarf in the Afghanistan desert. In the next scene, we are once again shown Quiet, but this time, she's just owning Diamond Dog's soldiers inside Mother Base. It looks like she's either infiltrating Mother Base before she is captured and interrogated, or she has already been interrogated, somehow freed herself, and is now attempting to escape. Now notice how Quiet is boasting her more exposed outfit while kicking all kinds of ass. As mentioned before, it's possible that exposing her skin is what makes her powers work, and as of now, all we know about her powers is that she has some kind of vanishing mascara that may enhance her vision for sniping, and that she has supernatural agility. She also seems to have the innate ability to make men die happy, because what that lucky bastard saw from down there must have been frickin' glorious. Okay, joking aside, let's move on to the next scene, which shows a couple of Diamond Dog's choppers either on their way to a mission or back to base. Not really sure what's going on here with a guy pointing his rifle at Big Boss. The chopper itself is definitely Diamond Dog's, as noted by the red arrows or sideways V that are present in all Diamond Dog's choppers. So either the guy has a sick sense of humor and is just screwing around, or he's some kind of mole. Perhaps during the mission that they're coming back from, the enemy somehow managed to kill one of Big Boss's men and use his uniform as a disguise to make an attempt on Big Boss's life. Unfortunately, even if that were true, it's impossible to say who the enemy is just from this footage. Now, in this next shot, many of you proposed that this is perhaps Chico, but this kid is actually the African child from earlier, the one theorized to be Drebin. If you look closely, the kid here is clearly dark-skinned, and the hair has that same afro look. This kid seems to be getting a lot of time in the spotlight, both in this trailer and in last year's trailer, perhaps suggesting that he is an important character or someone we know like Drebin. We are then taken to the final shot of the non-director's cut version of the trailer, which is part of the same cutscene shown at the beginning. The trailer essentially comes full circle here, as we get a frontal shot of Snake, whose face is smothered in blood, similar to this previous shot. These similarities further suggest that the two shots are part of the same scene, with this one occurring while the flames are still burning, and this one after the flames die down. Now, the most noteworthy aspect of this shot is the size of Snake's debris/horn. If you compare it to a previous shot, you will notice that there's a significant size difference. Depending on which scene occurs first, either Snake's horn grows as the game goes along, or his horn starts out long and is eventually trimmed. My bet is on the former. Snake's horn grows as the game goes along. If we take a look at the hospital scene in the old Phantom Pain trailer, which is the intro portion of Phantom Pain, you can see that Snake's horn is nowhere near as large as it is in the E3 2014 trailer. Also, if you check out footage of earlier missions, like the one in Afghanistan, Snake's horn is quite small there as well. All the footage seems to suggest that Snake's horn will grow with the passage of time. Also, the horn growing just makes sense thematically, symbolizing how Snake is turning more and more into a demon as he descends further and further into madness through his lust for revenge. Don't ask me how the horn grows, I have no idea, but a possibility is that the debris slowly loosens up and extrudes from his skull as time passes, maybe as a cause of the skull putting pressure on the debris and just kind of pushing it out or something, I don't know. And thus, here is where the non-director's cut version of the trailer comes to an end. Something interesting to note about this shot is the noise in the background. The most popular assumption seems to be that these clings and beeps are noises emanating from a Geiger counter, which is a device that measures radiation. Why the noise is there, I have no idea, but it is an appropriate noise considering that the titular weapon of mass destruction is all about launching nukes from anywhere in the world. So for the people who watched this during Sony's press conference, the trailer ends right here, but those who saw the director's cut were treated with a bit more footage. As mentioned before, the original plan was to toss the ashes into the sea, but Big Boss refuses, believing this is not the way to honor the fallen comrades. The rest of the dialogue reveals Big Boss's plan for honorably memorializing them.
We'll make diamonds from their ashes. Take them into battle with us. A shining light to our brothers in arms, even in death. We are diamond dogs.
I don't know about you, but that's chillingly beautiful. And for those wondering, yes, Big Boss is being quite literal about what he's saying. Creating diamonds from human ashes is a real thing. They are called cremation diamonds or memorial diamonds. Essentially, it's possible to extract purified carbon from human ashes, and when this carbon is placed under conditions of extreme temperature and pressure, a diamond can be formed. Now, what's interesting is that based on the research I did, the process of extracting carbon from human ashes wasn't developed until 2001 by a company called LifeGem. In other words, making diamonds from human ashes shouldn't be possible during Phantom Pain's era. Then again, the same applies for devices like the iDroid or weapons like Metal Gear, so such inconsistencies are trivial at best. Now, hearing Big Boss's memorial proposal instantly made me think of this scene in the E3 2013 trailer where we see Big Boss interacting with African captives holding diamonds out, before Big Boss proceeds to shoot them. I could never figure out why Big Boss would do such a thing, but then this latest trailer got me thinking, what if these diamonds they're holding out Are those made from the ashes of his comrades? What if they were somehow stolen from Diamond Dogs by them? In Big Boss's eyes, wouldn't such an act be considered disrespectful towards the comrades these diamonds represent? That's the only reason I can think of for why Big Boss would be so pissed that he would kill them so ruthlessly. What are your thoughts? Alright, so from here on out, we are going to be shown a number of title cards like this one, but I'm going to talk about them last, so let's skip them for now. I also want to skip this shot right here because it doesn't really show anything new apart from a kick-ass view and a kick-ass line. Instead, let's talk about the shots that show Big Boss approaching a facility housing Metal Gear. Right off the bat, I would like to point out that assets like the landscape, the rock formations, and the bushes in this particular shot are identical to the ones found in the Afghanistan desert, which is where I believe the facility is located. If you're not convinced, also notice how Snake is wearing the scarf and the tiger stripes camo combo that he only seems to wear when in the desert. Unless there are other deserts in the game, Afghanistan seems like the most likely location of this facility. We are then taken deeper into the facility until we finally get a good view of a Metal Gear that looks a lot like Rex. I'm not gonna lie, this right here is confusing as hell. According to the history we know, development on Rex began sometime in 2002 when weapons company Arms Tech bribed DARPA chief Donald Anderson, known as SIGINT back in the day, to back and fund the project. So unless Phantom Pain provides some kind of explanation, this just cannot be the Rex from the Shadow Moses incident. There are also a number of differences between this model and the one seen in MGS1. For example, the legs on the older MGS5 model are clearly much thinner, and what you could call the eyes are much closer together, and there's only one of them each side instead of Rex's 3. Also, the newer MGS1 model, Rex as a whole, is just significantly wider and chunkier. Another key difference is that the radome on the older model is spherical, while the one on Rex is flat and circular. Despite these minor but significant differences, the older model is similar enough to Rex to either be a prototype or at the very least the inspiration behind Rex, similar to my theory that Diamond Dog's mother base might have been the inspiration behind Big Shell. Now, I have heard some people say that this could be the TX55 model of Metal Gear, but I personally don't think so, they just look too different. The Metal Gear that Kojima designed here clearly resembles Rex more than anything. Not much else can be said, unfortunately. We'll have to wait until Phantom Pain releases to get some more answers. Next, I would like to talk about the soldiers guarding the facility. These are without question XOF soldiers, which leads me to my next topic, Skullface. Like you, I am trying to wrap my head around why Snake would ally with a man responsible for the destruction of Mother Base, the loss of his comrades, and all the pain and anger boiling up inside him. Now, I know what some of you may be thinking. Snake never actually met Skullface, so he wouldn't know that Skullface was responsible. Well, true, but Snake has spent some quality time with the XOF unit during Mother Base's invasion in Ground Zeroes and during the hospital scene in Phantom Pain. He knows what they look like, so what the hell, right? I have two theories. One theory is that Snake is following Skullface to the facility under duress. Maybe Skullface has got hostages, giving Big Boss no choice but to do as he commands. But this just seems highly unlikely considering how Snake isn't cuffed or tied up or anything, and considering he's got 2 frickin' rifles and all his equipment on him. There's nothing about this footage that gives off the vibe that Snake is under duress. So my second theory, and I hate this one, is that Big Boss betrays Diamond Dogs at some point, or I should say, Diamond Dogs betrays Big Boss. I think there will come a point in the game when Big Boss goes so far in his quest for vengeance that Diamond Dogs, including Kaz Miller, will lose faith in his cause. There is evidence of this in the last seconds of the trailer, during which Big Boss kills Diamond Dog soldiers in a struggle, with an alarm sounding in the background, possibly Mother Base. And you can tell these are Diamond Dog soldiers by the yellow color in the inside part of their collars. More evidence lies in Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake. If you call Master Miller during the final battle against Big Boss, he will tell Solid Snake that Big Boss is a monster, meaning the two had some kind of falling out between Phantom Pain and Metal Gear 2. There is little doubt in my mind that Big Boss and Kaz will turn against each other in Phantom Pain, considering it will tell the story of Big Boss's downfall and how he becomes a monstrous villain. And what better way for Big Boss to become a monster than to kill his own comrades and to join the very man who was responsible for the horrible acts in Ground Zeroes? Just keep in mind that whatever his motivations may be for joining up with Skullface or shooting Diamond Dog soldiers, Big Boss will have his reasons, since Kojima wants players to empathize with the character in a similar fashion to Walter White from Breaking Bad, who similarly has his own reasons for doing the things he does, even if morally wrong. Kojima wants players to support Big Boss and at the same time question his actions. One final thing I would like to note about this scene is just how much blood there is. I get the feeling that this gruesome and realistic approach to violence will be adapted to gameplay as well. For example, I think if players pull off a headshot with a lethal weapon, we'll see something similar to what's shown here, including the pool of blood. There are actually signs of this in the recent gameplay presentation from E3 2014. When Snake performs this CQC move, there is blood left on the point of impact. Considering Kojima is going for a darker tone in Phantom Pain, an enhanced level of violence shouldn't come as a big surprise. Finally, here we are, the last shot of the trailer, in which we are given the release date of 1984, the year in which Phantom Pain takes place. There's obviously some kind of hidden message here, and the most popular assumption is that the numbers are an anagram for a release date, like 19th of August 2014 or September 8th 2014. But we all know that's just wishful thinking. The game won't be ready until at least 2015. Unfortunately, I have yet to decrypt these numbers, so when I or someone else comes up with something concrete, I'll be sure to make an update, so stay tuned. To end this trailer analysis, I would like to talk about the title cards in the last portion of the trailer. There are 4 of them in total, each representing a different organization. The first one says, "Tormented by Phantoms," with the MSF logo in the background. This one's pretty self-explanatory. The Phantoms are the MSF comrades who perished in Ground Zeroes, who torment Big Boss with an emotional phantom pain. What do I mean by that? Well, phantom pain is pain from something that doesn't exist, like a missing limb, or in this case, the dead. And even though these comrades are now dead and don't exist, Big Boss is still tormented by them through emotional pain. At least, that's the basic idea. Although last year's E3 trailer did show that those who don't exist may haunt and torment Big Boss in a more literal sense. Next up is Spirits of Ground Zeroes, with the XOF logo in the background. This one is a little harder to interpret since so little is known about XOF. All we know about it is that the unit is led by Skullface, and it's what destroyed Mother Base and MSF. So perhaps this phrase speaks of how the spirits from those who perished in Ground Zeroes at the hands of XOF have, in some ways, come back for vengeance through Big Boss's pain and anger. The next title card reads, "Time for Retribution," with the Diamond Dogs logo in the background. This one is also pretty self-explanatory, reiterating that the sole purpose of Diamond Dogs is retribution and revenge for the fallen, and nothing else. Finally, we have Venom Awakens, with the Outer Heaven logo in the back. Interesting to note is that there's a hole on the logo's skull around the same location where Big Boss's piece of debris is embedded. Anyways, Venom clearly refers to Big Boss's new name, Venom Snake, and the phrase Venom Awakens perhaps has something to do with the phrase V has come to from past trailers. Maybe the V stands for Venom, so Venom has come to. I don't think the phrase just refers to the fact that Big Boss has come to after a 9-year coma. It might also be foreshadowing that Venom Snake, this darkness and poison taking over Big Boss, will awaken by the end of the game when Outer Heaven is formed. Is it just me, or are the title cards almost summing up Metal Gear Solid 5's story? If you think about it, the first title card is a flashback to Ground Zeroes. The second and third title cards describe Snake's journey in Phantom Pain, and the last title card foreshadows what Phantom Pain will culminate to: the formation of Outer Heaven, the awakening of a new villain, and the rise of a new hero, Solid Snake. Fingers crossed for at least a small glimpse of the new hero. And with that, I would like to end this analysis, ladies and gentlemen. If you've made it all the way through, congratulations and thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, please be sure to give it a like and be sure to share it with your fellow MGS fans and gamers. And like always, I would love to hear your own analysis of the trailer in the comments below. Also, let us know if you notice anything that I missed or any mistakes that I made. If there is enough that I missed, I will certainly make a follow-up video to relay the missing information. And if you haven't done so yet, to be further updated on Metal Gear Solid 5, be sure to join the nation and subscribe to Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Thank you very much, and Young out. Desolation, devastation.